I'm just going to show you how I set up the Canon G10 for sort of landscape and sort of street photography, really, just a walk around camera. I've used the G10 for a long time now, and you can use it so many different ways. As you know, with a lot of these cameras you can set them up. I still use mainly manual mode with this camera. I start off at 200 5.6, that's 1/200, 1/200th of a second for the shutter speed, 5.6 for the aperture, and then 200 for the ISO. And that's mainly as a walk around camera, to be honest with you. Then what I found is to get the best file out of this camera for landscape, I actually use 80 ISO, so that's right down the bottom of its range. And what you'll find is, you know, on a sunny day that's going to be absolutely fine, but then I just alter shutter speed. Just switch that over for you so you can see. So I just move it down to 100th, maybe an 80th, 50th, so play around with shutter speed really. But I always start at 200 5.6 and work from there. So that's my golden rule for weddings and photography in general. 1/200th. The great thing about this particular camera with flash, just to mention the 200th, is it's actually got a leaf shutter, so the flash synchronizes at all the shutter speeds, which is really useful. So no focal plane shutter in the G10, which can be really, because you've got a hot shoe on the top, and that's really useful. So, you know, 200 5.6 in manual mode, and that's how I start. Let's just have a look in the menu and see what we've got. Go back to the beginning. So I use the Flexi Zone, which is basically a little white box, very simple focusing. It has got face detection, works okay, but I use Flexi Zone. F-point zoom is off, servo AF off, AF mode single. So I literally half press the shutter, use the white box in the center to focus. It won't focus too well on a white sheet like that, but that's the box I use. And I just use the focus and recompose technique. So half press, focus, recompose, very quick way to work with this camera, and that's what I do with most cameras, to be honest. So let's just go down, AF single, flash control you've got in there as well. I'm in manual mode, so you can play around with the flash. I don't really use flash with this camera that much, not at all, but you've got second curtain there, so second curtain flash will give you some different effects. So if you want a blurriness, well, a sort of streaking effect behind your subject with a burst of flash, something you can play around with. Probably one for another day to go into what second and first curtain flash is. But yeah, I default to second curtain really. So that's the basic settings in there. Let's just go to the top and let's have a look. So LCD brightness, it's a bright LCD actually, so I haven't had to boost this for this video, so it is very bright, but you've got some control over the LCD brightness in there, which is something to really look at. What I do with cameras is I really do try and match that up with my monitor and get the workflow going from the screen on the camera all the way through to print. So match it, you know, the steps in your workflow. The first thing you should be doing is taking some images, a fixed still life setup, colourful images, and then just, you know, matching up your monitor and calibrating your monitor as well. Power saving, let's have a look, display off after 3 minutes. So yeah, that's fine. Time zone, nothing too exciting in here, I'm just going through them. Obviously format, file numbering. Just use continuous file numbering, that means that every number is unique, so it just keeps going forever. I don't get involved with folders or anything like that. Just going through these, let's go back to the top. You can go through some themes as well, and you can set that up. But that's my very standard setup now. I'm just getting to a point where I can show you that. Now the biggest thing with this camera is you go through the menu and you think, where is everything? I mean, I can't find half the things. I'm not a great fan of the menu, to be honest with you, but you've got function set in the center, so give that a press and you'll suddenly see a lot more things that come up that you'll probably recognize, like white balance. So at the moment I've got this set on daylight. It's about 5200K, as you know, daylight. So if I know the conditions and where I am, then using the sunny symbol or daylight is fine. But you can record at RAW with this camera. So maybe auto white balance would be my standard sort of out and about, not worrying too much and producing a RAW file. But as you can see, you can change all the usual stuff. You can also do custom white balances, which is really useful. Quite an advanced little camera for its time, the G10. Bracketing, you can do some bracketing. I'll do that another day, I think, but it's a landscape technique. One thing I have done with the G10 a lot is bracket the shots in the landscape and then bringing them together in Photoshop to create an amazing dynamic range. It's a good file straight out of the camera, but I use the 3-shot method, probably 2/3 of a stop either side of the main exposure, and as I say, you can stack them together and do a contrast blending technique, and you can come up with an amazing dynamic range out of this old camera. Well, old camera. It's not that old to me, but that's what you can do. And I use it at 80 ISO because you get extremely clean files with no noise. There's the flash output, and that's why when you're in the menu you can have minimum, medium or full, and that's really useful because you can have complete control over your flash. And one thing you can do with this little camera that I've done is use the Neewer flash gun. I think it's the 283, I think. I've got it listed. I'll put some links in the description and links to everything I mention and pretty much all the products that I review on these YouTube videos, so have a look below. But what I do is I'll put the flash output, that's the tiny little flash that's on this camera, I put it right down low and I just use a tiny bit of flash out of the camera to trigger remote flashes. I've done that quite a lot because I train with this camera. This is my main training camera, nice and lightweight, and it does everything I want. So, but yeah, you've got some nice control over flash there, so that's really good in manual mode. Neutral density surprises people, but obviously it's a 2.8 lens when it's wide on this camera, and just having neutral density is very useful. So yeah, an inbuilt neutral density filter. Down, obviously I shoot RAW with this camera. Pretty much that's what I do. I don't really get a JPEG or anything like that. I just shoot RAW. So, but you've got everything there that you'd normally have. Just have a look at your pixels. This will teach you quite a lot about pixels, really. So you've got your large 4416 by 3312. That's a very large file, and that's your pixel dimensions. Very useful for learning. Look, that's 9 meg, so that's 345625592, and so on and so on. So that's very useful for. So look at the small, so that's 0.3 megabytes, 640 by 480. So that's like a web image. But yeah, what we do, the widescreen mode there as well, if you want that. So I produce a RAW file. That's my main interest from this camera. As I say, I have the main, if you looked at what I've done with this, has been my landscape camera at 80 ISO, and then I use bracketing and I shoot 3 RAWs. That's the main technique. So a street photography camera, I'm probably more inclined to maybe, I don't use it in RAW, but sorry, I don't use it in anything but manual mode. But you know, you're not really bracketing, but it's got a little viewfinder, so it's quite a useful little camera as a street camera as well. So yeah, that's pretty much set up now. That's where I go to. You can do a lot more with it, but function set, as I say, I'm not a great fan of this menu. You've got swap between your shutter speed, aperture and metering. So as you know, if you've watched any of my other videos, I don't use metering. I haven't used metering for many years, because you're working purely manually. You don't need to. So, but it's nice to know that you can go between shutter speed and aperture, and your ISO is on the top dial. So being able to change your ISO excuse me, it's very easy and very obvious, but I wouldn't shoot this camera above 100 ISO. So those are my basic settings. That's the camera set up now. It has got a little macro mode there, so you can get closer, and display if you press play, and then let's have a look what we got. Oh, some swans. So that would be from a training session, just showing somebody the histogram. It's got a really nice large histogram. Actually at ISO 200. Take notice of that really. This is just playing around. And you know, that's a massive benefit. You've got a nice big display button which you can cycle through. A great screen on this camera. It looks contrasty on the video. I'm just looking down, but the bottom line is it's not. It's a really good screen. But yeah, that's how I mainly work, is with it in the split view of the histogram and then a small image. And it looks like I was using daylight there, so you know, I use the sunny symbol to really fix the camera at 5200. If you watch a lot of the other videos, I keep mentioning other videos, go and have a look through, you'll see 200, 205.6 come up a lot, and you'll see just fixing at 5000K and working from there, cooling your images or warming your images from a reference point, and moving from 200, 205.6 as an exposure point. So, you know, these are all little tips. If I could offer you the biggest tip of all, it would be to simplify your photography to the nth degree. That's when I really moved a long way with photography. Probably, it was literally 15 years ago. But when I hit the first weddings, and this was part of the process, the G10 came with me, I had to have a system. It was very simple. So working from 200 to 205.6 and fixing your white balance and moving from there makes a lot of difference. If you're in auto and if you're on aperture priority, I've got nothing against any of these modes if you're coming back with the results, but I can say that, you know, if you do learn manual mode, you'll go a long way. If you need any courses, I'm actually doing a lot of Zoom calls at the moment, so doing about equipment and just unlocking little, you know, people have blockages, and we all do. I'm learning more and more about video all the time, but if you're finding that you're having problems with, you know, anything, they're obviously paid courses, and I do it by hourly rate on Zoom, and people are really pleased when they come out, because I've run one-to-one tuition directly for the past 5 years and had great results with people. I'm the sort of person that doesn't stop until I get a result with somebody. So if you are struggling and you know, this is a big puzzle to you, just get in touch and we can organise a course. I'll put all the links in the description. Maybe I'll put a link to the course pages on my website. So that's just how I set up the G10. Very simple. I'll say it again. 200, 5.6 for outside. That's your starting point. That's an overcast day, open shade. As it gets sunnier, you're going to change. As it gets darker, you're going to change, but you've got a fixed reference point. And then we've got the sunny symbol, which you can use to fix the eye, to fix the white balance at 5200K. And that's what it is. And then shoot raw, and you've got a good starter there. I can highly recommend the G10. You're going to get some really good prices on this camera. There's a G11 as well. I didn't have any of the others. I mean, I'd love to collect them all, obviously, all the Canons. I'd love a cupboard full of them, but the G10 was that good, and it just fitted a purpose. It wasn't necessarily a great wedding camera, but the bottom line is I could take it and I could get away with shooting an outdoor wedding, no problem at all. Not so great in the churches. This camera is, well, very poor at anything above ISO 400, so 800, 1600. If you don't like noise, don't go there. Okay, so I hope that helps, and I'll see you again soon.